Hello, welcome to a big All-Star Mile preview edition of The Outside Fence. I'm your host, as always, Tristan Heffernan, and joined by my Melbourne racing expert, Stewart Bowles-Brown. Bowles, All-Star Mile, what are your thoughts on the concept straight off the bat?
I'm take it or leave it, really. I'm not sort of in love with it, to be honest, but it is what it is. It seems like it's here to stay, I suppose. It's Melbourne's version of the Everest, but I don't think it's quite sort of lived up to the expectations of what it is compared to sort of what a race the Everest is. But it's a good opportunity, I suppose, for a few battling horses to run for some big money, and then you've got your top end horses who also go around.
There's a lot of chatter on Twitter about the strength of the field. Obviously, the big prize money is the main talking point. $5 million up for grabs. What are your thoughts on the strength of the field? I think obviously there's a few Sydney siders are quite quick to pot it, but we're going to go through later on and have a look at a replay of the Cox Plate for starters. We've got a number of horses that ran in our biggest weight for age race. So from that point of view, I think the field's quite reasonable for a race of this quality.
It is. Like, you're always going to expect, I suppose, a bit of a tail in a race like this, given the concept where voting gets the horses in the field. But yeah, the top end is very good. Obviously, it took away a bit from the Australian Cup last week with, I suppose, Arcadia Queen and Russian Camelot probably would have run in that race if there was no All-Star Mile. But yeah, the top 4 or 5 horses here are obviously sort of worthy Group 1 horses. But as you'd expect in a race like this, there is a bit of a tail there.
Okay, let's jump straight in and talk about the track first, Moonee Valley. They get their chance to host the All-Star Mile. Obviously, it goes around the Melbourne tracks year by year. There's wonderful weather forecast all the way through the week, except for Saturday, which is no surprise there. All of a sudden, we're expecting between 8 and 20 mils of rain. Rails in the true. Can you give the punters out there some sort of idea on what to expect?
Yeah, so rail, as you mentioned, rail in the true. It's the first time it's been back in the true since Jan 22. So that predominantly that inside 3 metres has been protected for sort of 6 weeks or so. The last couple of meetings, the rail's been out a bit as well. So the track, particularly that inside part, should be in good nick. Depending, obviously, how much rain we do get. With the rail truth, they do get a fair bit of rain. It tends to chop up on the inside there, and they tend to sort of get off the fence, particularly as the day goes on. With the All-Star Mile being race 8, if they got up towards that 20 mils of rain, I'd expect the fence to be off by then, and you'd probably want horses that are sort of swooping and out wide on the track.
Okay, the forecast does have the rain hitting early afternoon, so we do know that the tracks can deteriorate a lot more quickly when the rain is coming during the day when the races are on. I think back to last year, there was one particular day when Moonee Valley was smashed by rain and we ended up with an absolute mad leaders track. Do you reckon there's any chance we could see something like that with the rail back in the true?
I'd be very surprised. That was pretty much as heavy as Moonee Valley gets, and it was just very much hard work for all concerned that day. But yeah, I'd expect we'd only be in the soft range at worst. So I'd be surprised if it's sort of very heavily leader biased. But obviously, it's definitely something to keep an eye on with Moonee Valley, and as I mentioned, particularly with that sort of fresh ground on the inside. It's always something, especially those first few races, just to keep an eye on, see where those winners are settling in the run, and even where the place getters are settling in the run. If sort of nothing's coming wide and making ground, and they're all sort of horses racing on the fence, the ones sort of in the placings, it's probably it's probably a day where you want to be close to the fence. But yeah, I'm expecting, if the rain does hit, the fence to go off, particularly by All-Star Mile time.
Okay, that is the challenge we deal with doing a preview show a couple of days out from the race. There's so much that happens on race day needs to be taken into account. So for that reason, that's why we go through the whole race and we try and throw a few different angles at you, and hopefully you are able to adjust if there is a pattern or something to do with the track that you need to adjust for. Let's dive straight into the field on that note. We'll bring up the prices here. We've got 2 quality mares in Arcadia Queen and Probabeel heading the market, and then Probably one of the most interesting horses we've had in the past couple of years going around. Russian Camelot there is the only other runner under double figures. What did you think of the market when you first had a look, Balls?
Yeah, there weren't too many surprises. Obviously, bookmakers have been betting on this race for a fair while now, so they've had time to, and the final field's been known for a while, so they've had time to sort of manicure that market and get into a state they like. I suppose it changed a little bit with the barrier draw, as it tends to do, but not too many surprises in the market.
Cool, let's go to the speed map. The first thing I see here is we've got a lot of horses in that second half of the field, just a few of them rolling forward here. First of all, let's talk about your expected tempo. Graceful Glamour looks like it'll find the front, but does tend to like to bowl along. And then maybe we'll just talk about some map issues for some of those horses getting back in the field.
Yeah, I tend to think there would be a speed that sort of would give all horses their chance. As you mentioned, Graceful Glamour does like to bowl along in front. She's not really one to sort of stack them up and sprint home. There's a bit of speed there drawn out wide. Obviously, Streets of Avalon, generally a go-forward horse. There has been a bit of talk this week about possibly sort of riding in a bit quieter or taking a sit, but that would be sort of foolish in my opinion. They'd be well served probably going forward from that wide gate, finding a position. A horse like Still a Star, drawn the outside gate. I wouldn't be shocked if they sort of ride it a bit quieter from that gate, but there is a chance they'll want to go forward on it as well. And then you've got your horse like Shout the Bars, sort of looks a logical box seat chance there from the low draw with Michael Walker on, who sort of tends to like to take cover on a lot of his horses. And then Probabeel as well. Should settle close to the speed up to 1600, and I've got mapped in a nice spot there, and so wouldn't be surprised if she can find sort of a spot around that 1 out 1 back position.
Yeah, if I obviously I know a little bit more about Still a Star than many of these runners. If I was giving riding instructions, I'd be rolling forward from that wide barrier, especially looking at that map. That if Graceful Glamour does decide to run along early, I reckon the best chance of slotting in would be up there on the speed, but these wide gates can really scare connections into trying to get cover as quick as they possibly can. So, yeah, I think I tend to agree with you. I think it'll be a reasonable tempo, but if they do take their positions pretty early, I don't think it'll be any disadvantage being on speed, that's for sure, unless we've got plenty of rain to deal with. We've got 4 lead-up races to go through. First of all, we're going to go back and look at last year's Cox Plate. Before we look at the race here, Balls, I just want to get your thoughts on if you can take anything out of this race, given it was over the 2,040 metres. It was on soft ground. It might be a pretty similar track to what we're going to get on Saturday.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it's as wet on Saturday, but yeah, it's a high chance we will be in the soft range. As far as can you take much from it, maybe only a little bit, but it's probably more interest sake than anything else. One thing of note, I suppose, out of this race is just noting the SPs of all the horses from this race. So we had Sir Dragonet, who was heavily backed at the finish, was the eventual winner of this race, started at $7.50. Russian Camelot was well backed as well as he usually is, was started at $3.50. Mugger 2 was a $26 chance. Arcadia Queen was a $7 chance, and Probabeel was a $10 chance. So, as you can see, based on the prices on Saturday, there's sort of a bit has changed since then. Obviously, we're looking at a 1,600 metre race as opposed to a 2,040 metre race of the Cox Plate. But it's definitely something of interest going into Saturday's race, given a lot of the main chances ran in this Cox Plate.
Okay, as I run it through, we've got Probabeel up second, Russian Camelot 4th, Mugger 2's out there wide in the Australian bloodstock colours, going around. Sir Dragonet was nearer the inside, and of course Arcadia Queen, back where you like to map all Bob Peters' horses there, Balls, in the pink and white near the tail of the field. Let's start with the favourite. Actually, no, we've got Arcadia Queen. We're going to show her run in the futurity as well. So let's talk about Sir Dragonet to start with, because he was a raging hot favourite off a very impressive trial, and then didn't show up at all in the All Stakes. Goes to 1,600 now. Do you expect we're going to see a better run from Sir Dragonet?
I definitely expect we'll see a better run, particularly if we do get soft conditions, because that's obviously what he liked and he got on this occasion. The ore was sort of 1400 around Caulfield on dry ground as well. So, it was sort of a bit of an unknown for him, but he was very heavily backed to, which is something I suppose of note. I was happy to take him on in that ore, but he looks much better suited on Saturday. I suppose the issue will be still at 1600, so maybe he still wants further. But if we do get significant rain, then that'll sort of bring him into the race, and I'd say he'd be at least a place chance if we did get significant rain.
Absolutely. It's interesting weighing up that SP profile, so to speak, given how short he started in the ore. I remember we did the preview and neither of us sort of were in his corner at all. So do you consider that, wow, that money that just continued to come for him, and they did pile it on in this Cox Plate. The Cox Plate had been a great race for the fat cats to get fatter the last couple of years. All of a sudden he gets out to pretty good odds now for this race.
Yeah, I definitely respect the SP from last start because, as you mentioned, it was easy to make a case to be against him, and he was still very firm in the betting. So there's definitely something to note from that. But yeah, I want to see significant rain on Saturday before I sort of would entertain getting stuck into Sir Dragonet. At this stage, I'm sort of willing to go around him.
Okay, another runner out of this Cox Plate is of extreme interest, Russian Camelot, who's first up here in the All-Star Mile. A similar preparation last time. He ran first up in the Maccabi Diva, and he ran a very good race there. What are your thoughts on this horse?
Yeah, he's probably the most interesting horse in the race, given he's first up into it, and he's been such a high-profile horse for the large majority of his career. As you mentioned, he ran a cracking race first up last prep in the Maccabi Diva, where he sat wide, no cover for the rest of the race and just went down behind Fierce Impact. He's had a trial and a jump out. This preparation for this, his trial was fairly decent. His jump out was sort of a ticking over sort of jump out in slow time. I suppose one of the issues I can see for Russian Camelot in this race is his barrier draw, but he's drawn barrier 2. Which could be quite tricky if he ends up on the fence. He seems to be a horse that races better with a bit of room. And then, as we mentioned, if by race 8 the fence isn't the place to be, then he could easily be in the wrong part of the track. He's a horse I sort of haven't found here, but I've got great respect for him, given what he's done so far in his career. And as we've probably mentioned during the spring with Russian Camelot, he is a horse that the punters tend to find as well. He's been quite well backed in a lot of his starts, and even sort of very firm in the betting in his other ones. So I'd expect the same to be. I expect that to be the case on Saturday. I'm sure he'll have some. Sure, they'll have some fans, but yeah, I'm not one of them.
Okay, let's move into the Futurity Stakes. A few of those runners from the Cox Plate there, namely Probabeel and Arcadia Queen, they hit the market here. They come off this lead-up run. We've also got Streets of Avalon up there sitting second. We've got Behemoth, who had the spot behind the leader. Probabeel's there midfield, and Arcadia Queen is back and wide. First of all, let's just touch on this Futurity Stakes, because as we watched the replay, the inside was not the place to be on this day, was it?
No, it was a significant disadvantage for horses racing on the fence this day. Pretty much all the winners made their way out towards the middle of all sort of at least, say, 5 horses off the fence in the straight. A horse like Behemoth here is raced on the fence. You'd want to take that into account big time coming into this race. He definitely was in the right part of the track, whereas horses like Arcadia Queen, Mr. Quickie and Probabeel all were out sort of where you wanted to be on the day.
It's a good call. Mr. Quickie, he's there in the white and blue running home at the finish as well. Do you think that makes this a little bit of a trap in that the 2 horses at the top of the market are coming off runs where they were in the right part of the track?
Possibly, like they obviously were suited on this day. I suppose with those 2 horses, though, it wasn't sort of a surprise or a run out of the box either. So I suppose they went to a level that you sort of expect from them. So I'm sort of not discounting them too much on this. I definitely will note that they were in the right part of the track. But as you see, been fairly dominant over the rest of the field there. And I tend to think sort of them being the first two favourites on Saturday is probably the right way. The market looks right at the moment with them as the top two in the market.
So Probabeel had Arcadia Queen's measure here. Obviously, the market has got Arcadia Queen favourite. Do you think that's a fair assumption to make that she can turn the tables here?
Yeah, I do. Obviously, forgetting at this stage sort of what the track conditions are going to be like on Saturday, I think obviously Probabeel was second up in this race, whereas Arcadia Queen was first up. So I tend to think Arcadia Queen probably has a bit more improvement left in it. Going up to the mile probably suits her a bit more than Probabeel, even though Probabeel's obviously got a decent record at a mile as well. So yeah, I tend to think Arcadia Queen deserves to be favourite. Obviously, track conditions are going to play a big part on her chances on Saturday. And she did sort of have every chance in this race sitting on the back of Probabeel for most of the race too. So I don't think there's a huge amount between them, but yeah, I've marked Arcadia Queen as favourite.
We've talked a lot about her in the spring, Arcadia Queen, about really wanting the dry ground. Interesting comments from Probabeel's camp, though, that they would prefer her to be on dry ground as well. What did you make of them?
Yeah, that's not surprising to hear that. Her best runs have been on dry ground. I tend to think Probabeel, even if it's, say, a soft 5 or even maybe to a soft 6, it's not the end of the world for Probabeel. Obviously, Arcadia Queen's form seems to be sort of definitely lesser once they get into that soft range, which is definitely a concern for her. But yeah, both horses, it's interesting. Both of those favourites definitely would prefer dry ground, whereas a few of the other sort of horses in the market behind them would be looking for rain on Saturday.
Okay, let's talk about a couple there that finished behind. Mr. Quickie, first of all, we sort of penciled this guy in as a fresh miler. So the 1600 looks pretty ideal for him, but maybe just a class query at this level on him?
Yeah, he's a horse I've found very hard to catch over his career, particularly since he's got into this sort of stakes level. He ran well here first up, sort of third best sectionals of the race behind the first late sectionals of the race behind those first two home. As you mentioned, he has run some cracking races on the fresh side before, so it wasn't a shock to see him get into the placings here. He did find the better part of the track as well. So, and I think from the barrier on Saturday, he's likely to be one of the last in the running. So his major hope would be the fence going off and sort of making a wide sweeping run being the play. If that's the case, he's probably a place chance in the race. The other thing with Mr. Quickie, he probably doesn't want it too wet either. So that's probably going to be an issue for him on Saturday. So if he's after similar conditions to those first two, I'd be very surprised if he could turn the tables on him, barring any bad luck. Good
points there. And Behemoth, we were both very confident on this horse in this particular race, the Futurity. On reflection, gate 1 and his position in running was a major negative. Whether that was enough of a negative to account for the 3 odd lengths he was beaten there. Interesting that he went around favourite in that race, and now he's in the double figures here for the All-Star Mile. Is there a chance that he can turn the tables here?
I'd be a little bit surprised if he could. Purely, a lot of it has to do, I suppose, with going up to the mile. I think the first two are definitely more suited up to a mile than he is. He's never been at a mile before. He's drawn gate 1 again, which I don't think is an ideal gate for Behemoth, given he's a big horse. He probably wants a bit of room. Moonee Valley, sort of a tight track. Even though he won there as a younger horse very impressively, he sat out the back and made that sort of wide sweeping run that he can do. So, I'd be surprised if he can turn the tables off over the first two there. He's got genuine excuses out of this run, having raced on the fence and sort of been in the wrong part of the track. But I almost still would have liked to see him sort of finish off a little bit better and say beat Mr. Quickie home. But, I tend to think he's more of a place chance on Saturday.
Okay, the other one there in this race was Streets of Avalon. He sort of had his Christmases already, this prep, with wins in the Australia Stakes and the Orr Stakes, but hard to see him at this level up to the mile now, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think he's outclassed by the top few favourites here, but also going up to a mile is against him.
Okay, let's go across to Sydney now, where we'll have a look at the Apollo Stakes. Now, this was run on wet ground. It was a soft 7. 2 runners of note here. Back in the field, we've got 50 stars outside of Mugger 2. We've obviously seen Mugger 2, who ran a bottler in the Cox Plate. This is his lead-up run to the All-Star Mile, and he went superbly here.
Yeah, he did. It was quite a slowly run race, so he wasn't suited, sort of being back on the inside there. But he's finished off second best last 400 of the meeting and the best last 200 of the meeting. So he's pretty much gone as well as he could in this field of sort of high-class horses. And you'll notice even visually sort of that last 100 metres and through the line, he's quite impressive here. So, yeah, I was quite impressed with his first up run. You mentioned he's run the Cox Plate in the spring where he's caught wide the trip and sort of loomed on the turn and even wobbled a bit. So it's maybe a little concern going back to Moonee Valley. He possibly didn't get around the turn great in the Cox Plate, but it may have been, he just might have been a bit tired at the time. Yeah, I think he's a good chance on Saturday, particularly if the rain comes as well. He's another who would definitely like the rain to come. And Hugh Bowman replaces Karen McAvoy as well, so I think that's a bit of a significant jockey upgrade on the horse as well. So, yeah, I think he's definitely a winning chance on Saturday, Mugger 2.
Okay, the strength of this form looks pretty good to me from the Apollo. Colette, obviously a classy mare, and we've got Very Elegant. We know what she did in the spring. So we know Mugger 2's up to this level from his Cox Plate run, but he's not finishing behind any slouches in this run either, did he?
No, it was a pretty solid field. And the other thing is the stable and even the connections seem to have had this race, the All-Star Mile, in mind for a fair while as well. So I'd suggest this was very much a prep run first up in Sydney, and he'll be ready to go on Saturday.
What do you make of him at the 1,600 metres? I note he won fresh last preparation at 1,500 metres, but the majority of his form is over further.
Yeah, it's probably a little query in this class whether he's sort of sharp enough against horses like Arcadia Queen and Probabeel. But I suppose the thing I'd be banking on, if the rain does hit, if the fence does go off a bit, then I'll definitely be elevating him and thinking it sort of becomes a bit more than a mile race. So that's sort of what I'm banking on. And he's a horse that I'd obviously monitor the conditions of the day and how the track's playing, and then make a decision from there as far as whether I back him or not. Okay,
we see now 50 stars finished out the back there. We're going to go look at the Blamey, which we also see 50 stars in. He had a few little excuses there in the Australian Cup last week. He was beaten as favourite. He's emergency here. Do you give him any chance at all if he gets a run?
I wouldn't think he'd be totally hopeless. It'd be 3 weeks in a row that he's backing up, which is a bit unconventional, but he's the sort of horse who, as we mentioned last week, does run well on a backup. 3 weeks in a row, who knows sort of how much that would take out of him. But yeah, if we got rain and he somehow got in the field, I think he'd be one of the better roughies in the race, 50 stars.
Okay. In this race, the Blamey, he ran a very good second behind a horse called Star of the Seas, who's sitting there in the running line about midfield with the white and yellow with the black sleeves. Now, this is an interesting runner for mine, Star of the Seas, in that he's a very good his record at a mile is very strong, and he did measure up in sort of some of the major races last back in the spring up there in Sydney. This is obviously a step up from the Blamey, but can you give us a push for this horse?
Yeah, I don't think he's hopeless on Saturday. He's, as you mentioned, he's run well in a number of sort of big mile races, particularly in Sydney, over his career. He seems to be, his best form probably is on wet ground, but he has recently shown that sort of he can bring that form to dry ground, as he did here in the Blamey. So I don't think he absolutely needs a wet track. He's pretty versatile when it comes to track condition. He's obviously got winning form. He's come out of a fast run race there. Best of Days came out of that Blamey and was only just nosed out in the Australian Cup. So it sort of provided a bit of form that race. So yeah, I think he's sort of one of the sort of outside chances in the race. Once again, I don't think he's got the class of those sort of top few, but obviously if if he gets conditions to suit or a bit of bad luck strikes, say an Arcadia Queen or Probabeel, then he's sort of right in the race.
Yeah, I'm going to throw a few performances at you here. He ran second on a Doncaster on heavy ground behind Natoya. He ran basically a no second, a very elegant first up in the Wink Stakes last preparation on a soft 6. He then ran second in the George Main behind Colding, and then he was held up for a run in the Epsom, but I note he went round at $5 there, and Probabeel, the winner, went round at $6.50. She was drawn wide, but he's obviously performed against some very good horses there, and now he comes off a winning fast time in the Blamey Stakes. I think he needs wet ground to sort of get to the level he needs to be for this race, because obviously that's going to be against the two favourites. But I could definitely make a case for Star of the Seas if he gets conditions to suit. Let's go back to the market here now. There's a few other runners we haven't touched on. We probably won't need a lot of time on a couple of these. The Herovian, can you tell us much about this horse?
He's a bit of a cult hero from far north Queensland. He's had one run down in Victoria this preparation. Didn't get a lot of room back on the inside in the Shaftesbury Avenue, but I'd say this would be a bit rich for him.
Same for Regalo di Gaetano.
Yeah, definitely. I think he was beaten in a benchmark 88 in Adelaide last start, so yeah, I'd be shocked if he won.
Okay, Shout the Bar was obviously a Group 1 winner last prep in the Empire Rose. Kept reasonably safe there at $21. Is there any push you can give us for her?
I can a little bit, probably more as a place chance than anything else. She was pretty good run first up. She was 3 wide, no cover on the speed in a genuinely run race at Flemington behind Shayu, and battled on pretty well for third. Obviously, she won the Empire Rose last spring at a mile, and she's going to be one of those horses that races on the speed, probably gets every chance. And any rain that came wouldn't be a huge issue. I suppose a little negative for her is it's Damien Oliver and Michael Walker, so there's a bit of a jockey downgrade there. But yeah, she's going to be sort of put herself into the race, probably take any bad luck out of the equation, and I wouldn't be shocked if she fell into the placings.
Okay, Graceful Glamour, the likely leader. It looks too tough for her.
Yeah, she pulled up with a respiratory issue last start at Flemington after she ran poorly. As you said, she does look the leader here. The big issue with her would be, or outside of the class of the race, the big issue would be if the rain came, she definitely wants dry ground to show her best.
Still a Star at $41, the Tasmanian. Nearly impossible to line this horse up. She'd have to, obviously, a massive jump in grade, but she's never been out of the top 2 before.
No, she's got a great record, and she's been well placed in Tassie, as you mentioned, never missing the top 2. The map's obviously going to be an issue for her from the outside gate, so it'll be interesting to see sort of how Brendan McCool rides her and where he looks to position her in the run. She had a first run back on Launceston Cup Day in a few weeks ago after about 12 months off, and won the Vamos Stakes for mares there, running the best last 600, 400, 200 of the meeting off a slow tempo. So she's obviously going well. But as you say, yeah, the map and then the class of the race are probably the biggest issues for her.
Yeah, she did beat a pretty smart filly in DeRoche pretty comfortably last time. Obviously, there's a bit of a precedent with a Tassie mare winning this race before in Mystic Journey. Can we make any sort of comparison between the two?
I don't think so. Mystic Journey, it obviously was coming off a win in the Australian Guineas and was sort of well known on the mainland and showed that she was up to these kind of horses, whereas Still a Star's coming in just with Tasmanian form at this stage. But as you say, she's never missed top 2, so who knows?
Yeah, I'm hoping she gets in 1-1, Still a Star, and then we can really find out what she's made of. I really hope she doesn't get caught 3 wide and then you sort of don't learn anything there. Let's talk about this 3-year-old Luna Fox, who caused one of the biggest boil-overs you'd ever want to see in the Australian Guineas. If you are a Blinkers first-time punter, you probably well, you still would have needed a huge leap of faith, but you would have been giddy if you managed to take that lead in there. Can lightning strike twice for this horse?
I wouldn't have thought so, but I would have said the same thing before the Guineas, I suppose. But I think the jury's out a fair bit on the 3-year-old form this year, particularly sort of those horses that went round in the Guineas against sort of the older horses or in open age races. So, I still want to see. I'd want to see the 3-year-olds going a bit better against the older horses at this sort of level before I'd entertain a horse like Luna Fox.
Yeah, okay, we might pass on the two other emergencies. I don't think we'll get past 50 stars at all. Let's pull up the tips. We copped a bit of a pasting last week for our tips, so these aren't the be-all and end-all, but we've tried to line this up a bit given the rain that's forecast, and obviously the amount we get is going to change the complexion of this race quite considerably, as we've mentioned through the show already. You've given us 2 to work with here, Balls, depending on how much rain we get.
Yeah, I think if we don't get too much rain, the track remains relatively dry. I'm quite keen to back Arcadia Queen. I suppose a little concern that I didn't mention with her is that she sort of had that little sort of shoeing issue earlier this week, but I'd assume that'll be all okay. Obviously, that's something to monitor up to the race. And I suppose the other thing is she's drawn 5, so there's some chance you might get cluttered up a little bit between horses. So there's those little concerns about her, but I tend to think if she sort of gets the luck when needed, that she's going to be mighty hard to hold out, particularly sort of if we don't get the rain. The other horse I don't mind is Mugger2. Loved his first up run. I think his Cox Plate run was excellent as well at the trip. And so I think sort of up to a mile will suit him, and particularly if we do get the rain and the fence becomes a bit iffy, I'm quite keen to be with Mugger2 if that's the case.
Okay, I do share your thoughts a bit there. I'm only really keen to start betting on this race if we get considerable amount of rain, because I do find myself with the favourites there, Arcadia Queen and Probabeel on dry ground. So whether there's much value there, I'm not so sure. But if we can get in early when the rain comes, I want to be betting around 3 of them here. Sir Dragonet, I think, is probably pretty good odds if we're going to get a genuine wet track. I think his Cox Plate win was excellent, and I think he'd be worth a dabble at the price, even considering the 1,600 metre trip here. Star of the Seas is one with excellent wet track form around the mile. A little bit of a tricky draw, but if they're getting off the fence with the rain coming, I think at around sort of $15 he is as well. I think he's worth something on. And like you say, Mugger2, really good run first up, really good run in the Cox Plate, and he's double figures as well. I'd be happy to bet around those 3 if we get a genuinely wet track, and you might have to get in a bit earlier, because I assume the 2 favourites will be easy the more rain that hits the track. So it's a bit of a delicate operation, get the money on at the right time if that eventuates, but that's how I'll be looking to attack the race. What about the rest of the card, Balls? Can you throw anything for us our way?
I haven't had a huge amount of look, and especially given sort of the weather situation, I'm sort of don't want to lock myself in too much. I must say, though, sort of on my initial look, I was a little bit surprised that Persan was favourite in race 3, so I'll probably be looking to bet around him if he stays relatively firm. Obviously, on his last prep, it's probably fraught with danger doing that, and given how I've been going on this show recently, it probably makes him immoral, but I'm happy to bet around Persan in race 3.
All right, I'll throw out Still a Stars stablemate Shaborn Renegade in the Stain race with a very promising young apprentice Kyle Mascule on top. I don't usually throw out too many in Melbourne, but I reckon he's probably worth following off a good run in the Launceston Cup. Thank you as always, Balls, for going through that race. Hopefully we've given you, the viewer at home, plenty to consider with what's going to be a really interesting race. I'm actually looking forward to seeing it, not so much from a betting angle, but there's some good quality horses in there, and I'm really interested to see who's going to prevail. Thanks as always, Balls. If you did enjoy the show, give us a like, subscribe, share us around on social media, you know the drill, and yeah, until next time. I don't know when next time will be, actually, Balls, but until then, see you then.
Thanks, Hef. Pleasure as always.